In the woods behind the main hall, I was enjoying the view. Her name was Isabel Martin. She was, without a doubt, the queen bee of Northwood Prep. Valedictorian, too. Her spot at #1 was unshakable. Ivy League material, the kind they write articles about. Her nickname was the Ice Queen, and she lived up to it. Always in the same faded school uniform. Always alone, her face a blank canvas. Proud and distant. But today the ice was showing cracks. That perpetually frosty face was pale, her lips bitten colorless. There were dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. She just stood there in front of me, pulled as taut as a violin string. I didn't say anything, waiting for her to break the silence. I had no idea why she, a model student, would seek out a slacker like me. But I could guess it had something to do with money. Everyone at Northwood knew my family had it. Leo Vance. Her voice was hoarse and trembling slightly, but she was fighting to keep it steady. Yeah, I grunted, letting her know she could continue. She took a deep breath, like it took every ounce of her strength to force the words out. I need money. $100,000. My mom's sick. She needs surgery urgently. After she said it, she stared at me, her eyes a swirling mess of desperation and conflict. I nodded to show I'd heard. Then silence. The quiet was suffocating. The only sound was the wind rustling the leaves, a sound that seemed to mock her predicament. Her face grew paler. The string snapped. I'll give you anything. She lowered her eyes, long lashes hiding whatever was left in them. Her voice was barely a whisper. Everything I have. I had a laugh. The whole situation was absurd. I tilted my head, looking her over with genuine curiosity. From her hands, clenched so tight the knuckles were white, to her face, now flushed with humiliation. So, I began, my voice slow and deliberate, shattering the quiet. You think your body, or your so-called everything, is worth $100,000? That one sentence hit her like a physical blow. Her head shot up, her body shuddered, and her beautiful eyes filled with a bottomless shame. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her eyes welled up, but she stubbornly held the tears back. After a long 30 seconds, as if she'd made some final, terrible decision, her voice came out choked but clear. Not just my body, my heart, my life, my entire future. It can all be yours. Just save my mother, and my life belongs to you. Wow, she was really going all in. A modern-day damsel selling herself to save her mom. The urge to laugh grew stronger. Her heart, the heart of the brilliant, untouchable Ice Queen. Sounds valuable, I guess. Too bad I don't believe in love. My father, who was constantly juggling mistresses, and my mother, who had her own long-lost love on the side, managed to get married for the sake of a corporate merger. They've kept up the perfect couple charade for over 20 years. Do they have hearts? Maybe, but they gave them to other people. So, don't talk to me about hearts. I'm not buying it. I stood up straight and walked over to her. I was a head taller, and I could see every trembling eyelash, each one holding a tiny, glistening tear. I reached out my hand. She flinched and squeezed her eyes shut. My finger gently flicked her forehead. She froze, her eyes fluttering open in a daze. I shoved my hands back in my pockets, staring straight into her eyes. Isabel, let's get something straight, I said, each word sharp and clear. Do you want me to be the scumbag who takes advantage of your situation and makes a deal for your body? Or do you want me to be the good guy, the charity case, who helps you out of the kindness of his heart? She was completely floored. Her mouth hung open, her mind clearly rebooting. I was patient. I just watched her. Finally it clicked. Her tense shoulders slumped, and with a sliver of frail hope, she whispered, "Help me." The sound was barely there. "Please." But I just shook my head. "Nope, I'm not a philanthropist. I may have money, but I don't waste it. For $100,000, I could buy a decent vintage Macallan." The plea in her eyes curdled into anger and despair, probably at me for toying with her. Seeing her look so broken, my dark amusement faded. Crap, maybe I'd pushed it too far. Even though I didn't approve of her treating herself like a commodity, a life was on the line. And damn it all, I'm just a handsome guy with a good heart. I switched gears. Look, I don't want to be the scumbag or the good guy, but we can be businessmen. She looked at me, confused. I remember your grades are solid. You're a blue chip prospect. So, I can lend you the money. Think of it as a personal investment. 100,000. I can wire it to you or pay the hospital directly, your choice. Her eyes exploded with a huge, disbelieving joy. But I held up a finger. There are conditions. 10 years from now, you pay me back 200,000. The interest isn't high. For you, that should be easy. And you have to get into an Ivy League school after graduation next month. That's the first proof of your potential to repay the loan, and it's the risk management clause for this investment. She was stunned. Then, as if grabbing the last lifeline, she nodded frantically, terrified I'd change my mind. I gave her my number, then turned and walked away, not bothering to see her expression. Deal. As I walked out of the woods, the sun felt warm on my skin. Just then, a guy in a school uniform ran past me, shooting me a hateful glare. Judging by his direction, he was heading for Isabel. I frowned. Wasn't that the guy who was supposedly number 2 in our class and had been chasing Isabel for 3 years? Looked like him. His taste was questionable, though. A woman who would even consider selling herself for money. Could she really handle the complexities of a real relationship? I stretched. Not my problem. I don't believe in love anyway. Still, now I had to call my lawyer to draft an agreement. What a pain. Truthfully, I didn't care if she ever paid me back. 100 grand was nothing to me. The contract, the terms, they were just for show. A barrier I set up for myself. Otherwise, it's Isabel Martin today, Jessica Miller tomorrow. Every sob story would be lining up at my door. And no matter how rich I was, I couldn't afford to be everyone's savior. I was the designated slacker in my family. I had to be smart with my money to make sure I could coast in luxury for the rest of my life. Spending 100 grand to buy myself the satisfaction of, I did a good deed today, while also getting a front row seat to the Ice Queen's meltdown? Not a bad trade. But if it became a daily thing, I'd go crazy. After talking to the lawyer, we set a time and place. I hung up and texted the contract draft to Isabel. That was that. I walked toward my original destination, a club activity room. Through the window, I could see my childhood friend, Chloe Preston, getting cozy with some punk. The Prestons and the Van Cess were old family friends. Our businesses deeply intertwined. So, Chloe and I were, for all intents and purposes, childhood buddies. But that wasn't the important part. The important part was Chloe's older sister, Victoria Preston. A true golden girl, gorgeous, brilliant, and tough as nails. Crucially, she was incredibly generous to me. Every time I saw her, the pocket money she gave me was in the 6-figure range. For someone like me, whose life ambition was to be a professional slacker, she was a walking, talking ATM. My life's motto. Anyone who gives me money is a good person. What's more, Victoria was about to get engaged to my so-called elite older brother, Julian Vance. Soon she'd be my official sister-in-law. With our families even closer, my life of luxurious laziness would be even more secure. So, when Chloe started letting her grades slide from the top of the class to the miserable middle all for some deadbeat, and Victoria specifically asked me to check on her, I knew I had to step in. You take someone's money, you do them a favor. That's how you keep the cash flowing. Before I even opened the door, a guy stumbled out, tears in his eyes, and ran right into me. He staggered back, looked up at me with humiliation and anger, and I recognized him. He was one of the scholarship kids Chloe used to sponsor. Good grades, quiet kid. From the look on his face, this was a classic case of, I fell for my benefactor, but she fell for a bad boy. I shook my head, wanting to laugh. The kid was so naive. For rich kids like us, throwing money at a cause is often just a habit, a way to pass the time and show off our status. It doesn't mean we're saints. If you really want to show gratitude, you climb the ladder and pay it back with interest and influence. That's how the world works. Getting feelings involved, you're just asking for pain. Look at him now, heartbroken and pathetic. I ignored him and pushed open the half-closed door. With a creak, the scene inside was laid bare. Chloe was practically lying in the arms of that punk, Ryder, laughing her head off. His hand was planted firmly and inappropriately on her waist. Hearing the door, Chloe's smile froze. When she saw it was me, she scowled. Leo, what are you doing here? She sat up, disentangling herself from Ryder, her voice dripping with annoyance. Are you here to tell me to break up with him too? Don't waste your breath. She stood up and looked me up and down with open contempt. You're the useless screw-up of the Vance family. You can't even get your own life straight. What right do you have to tell me what to do? I wasn't offended. I actually wanted to laugh. Useless? I'd spent more than a decade cultivating that brand. Why would I be mad? I casually pulled over a dusty chair, sat down, and crossed my legs. My gaze went past her to Ryder, who was now nervously avoiding my eyes. Earring, nose ring, tongue stud, and a head of bleach blonde hair. Wow, he really checked all the boxes. He looked like a stock photo from some 90s punk catalog. Relax, I said to Chloe, waving a hand with a harmless smile. I'm not here to manage you. I'm just curious. I looked at her with interest. How did the prim and proper Miss Preston suddenly develop a taste for this? My casual tone only made her angrier. What do you know? She snapped, her voice rising as if she were trying to convince herself as much as me. Ryder's not like you phony rich boys. He's real. He's free. She grabbed Ryder's arm, her face alight with a near-fanatical adoration. This is what it means to be alive. Your kind of life, all planned out and boring. That's the real waste. She then turned her attack back to me. Especially you, Leo. You suck at school. You suck at having fun. If you weren't a Vance, what would you be? You're a complete and utter waste of space. Oh, I nodded, feigning enlightenment. I get it. The call of the wild, huh? Chloe probably thought she'd won me over. A smug look spread across her face. Ryder puffed out his chest, his expression less fearful now. The next second, I grabbed the chair I was sitting on and, without any warning, swung it with all my might at Ryder's legs. Crack! The sound echoed through the room, followed by Ryder's blood-curdling scream. The world went silent. The smug look on Chloe's face froze, replaced by pure horror. She stared blankly at Ryder, who was on the floor, clutching his leg and howling, then looked back at me in disbelief. Leo, are you insane? She shrieked, lunging at me, hands out like claws, trying to scratch my face. I sidestepped, grabbed her wrist, and with my other hand, gave her a light but sharp tap across the cheek. Smack, a crisp sound. It wasn't hard, but it was deeply humiliating. Chloe was stunned. She clutched her face, tears streaming down her cheeks like a broken necklace. You hit me. Are you awake now? I let go of her hand, looking down at her. She flinched under my gaze and took a step back. Ryder was still whimpering on the floor, his eyes filled with terror. You like things real, right? You like freedom? I walked over to him and planted my foot on his chest. Come on, tell me. How do you feel right now, feeling free? Ryder was sweating profusely, unable to say a word. Chloe tried to pull me away, but one look from me sent her scurrying back. You're so tough. Aren't you such a rebel? I crouched down and patted Ryder's face. Why so quiet now? He trembled, not daring to make a sound. I stood up, suddenly bored. This guy had no guts, and he was trying to hook a rich girl. I grabbed a still-shaking Chloe and, dragging Ryder like a sack of potatoes, headed outside. Let go of me. We have to go to the hospital. Ryder, he's... Shut up. I cut her off coldly. Say one more word, and I'll break his other leg. Chloe instantly went silent, her only protest a stream of quiet sobs. I didn't take them to a hospital. I called an Uber and went straight to the industrial flats on the west side, a notoriously rough part of town. Grimy internet cafes, seedy pool halls, streetwalkers, and drunks reeking of cheap booze. I dragged her out of the car and shoved her against the wall of the filthy alley. The stench of urine and rotting garbage was overwhelming. Chloe immediately threw up. I ignored her and pointed to a group of junkies arguing and shoving each other at the mouth of the alley. Look, I said, there's your wind of youth. Is it real enough for you? Is it free enough? If you like it so much, I can throw you over there right now. Let them give you a real taste of what it means to be alive. Chloe's face went white. She was shaking like a leaf. She grabbed my arm, sobbing uncontrollably. I'm sorry, Leo. I was wrong. Let's go home, please. Just then, I caught a movement out of the corner of my eye. It was Ryder, limping badly. He'd snuck out the other end of the alley while we were distracted. He was running faster than a rabbit. He didn't even glance back at Chloe. I didn't bother chasing him. He wasn't worth the effort. Chloe saw him too. The last bit of color drained from her face. The final illusion shattered with his cowardly retreat. She stopped crying and just stood there, vacant, like her soul had been ripped out. I shoved her back in the car and gave the driver the Preston's address. She didn't say a word the entire way. When we got to our mansion, she got out herself and walked inside like a ghost. I didn't get out. I told the driver to turn around and take me home. That night, I got a text. It was from Victoria. "Leo, thanks." I sent back a no-problem gif. That was the end of that. Sure enough, the next 2 days were quiet. No angry calls from the Prestons. My mother did ask me about it indirectly. I just said Chloe was being stupid, and I helped the Prestons teach her a lesson. My mother didn't press it, just told me to be more careful in the future. I knew Victoria must have smoothed things over. My move had been the right one. My life as a wealthy slacker was secure. But the next day, I wasn't laughing anymore. Ryder was dead. Car accident. The world doesn't work with coincidences that neat. One day he gets a beating from me. The next he's roadkill. I'm not an idiot. If Victoria's hands weren't all over this, I'd eat my hat. My future sister-in-law was far more ruthless than I'd imagined. Suddenly, my family felt terrifying. Everyone wore a perfect mask, moving pieces on a chessboard of self-interest, coldly eliminating any obstacle. My elite brother Julian was like that. My brilliant future sister-in-law Victoria was like that. And my parents, with their picture-perfect sham of a marriage, were no different. I was the only anomaly, a waste of space who just wanted to coast. A shiver ran down my spine. I sat bolt upright in bed. Nope. I had to get out. I had to get away from these psychos. Now, you have to be alive to keep being lazy. It took me one night to decide to move out. I didn't tell anyone. The next morning, I came downstairs with a pre-packed suitcase. My mother was in the living room, elegantly sipping her morning coffee. She glanced up at me. "Where are you off to?" "Changing my sleeping arrangements," I said flatly. She didn't ask anything else, returning her attention to the financial news. My so-called father was probably shacked up with one of his mistresses again. This house was as cold as a tomb. Everyone moved in their own orbit, never interfering unless it affected their bottom line. I walked out of that magnificent, soulless mansion without a backward glance. I had a penthouse downtown I'd bought years ago. It had been sitting empty, but now it was perfect. The apartment was huge and barren. The fridge was a hollow cavern. I drove my sports car to the biggest supermarket in the area. I needed to fill this new home and my own gnawing anxiety with food. Junk food. Pushing a cart through the aisles, I was a mindless drone. Chips, soda, chocolate, frozen pizzas. I tossed items into the cart without a second thought. As I rounded a corner to grab a box of limited edition Kit Kats from high shelf, I stopped. In a corner of the snack aisle, a girl was furtively trying to stuff a loaf of bread into her sleeve. She looked a few years younger than me, small and slight, dressed in a faded, ill-fitting school uniform. She had a clean, pretty face with big eyes like a startled deer. Too bad her hands weren't as clean. I didn't make a sound. I just leaned against a shelf, arms crossed, and watched with amusement. She was struggling. The sleeve was too tight, the bread too bulky. She tried again and again, a sheen of sweat breaking out on her forehead. Finally, sensing something, she froze and slowly looked up. Our eyes met. I just stared. 1 second. 2. 10. Her face went from white to red, then back to a ghostly white. Her big eyes filled first with terror, then panic, and finally a deep, drowning shame. The hand holding the bread was shaking uncontrollably. Thump! The loaf of bread fell to the floor. She deflated, all the energy draining out of her. She hung her head, looking like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. The show was over. I walked over, picked up the bread, and tossed it into my cart. Then I swept handfuls of cookies, candy, and chocolate from the adjacent shelf into my cart. Soon it was overflowing. I pushed the cart over to her. She was still looking at the floor, tensed up, as if waiting for a verdict. I nudged her worn-out canvas sneakers with my foot. No money for food. She stayed silent, trembled slightly, then gave a tiny nod. A second later, as if remembering something, she shook her head violently. I was losing my patience. Nodding, shaking her head. What was this, charades? What is it? Use your words. My tone was sharper now. She jumped at the sound of my voice and looked up, startled. Her eyes were red-rimmed and full of tears, but she refused to let them fall. She opened her mouth, but only a few choked, garbled sounds came out. Then she shook her head again, gesturing frantically with her hands. I froze. A thought flickered through my mind. She's mute. Seeing her panicked, helpless expression, my irritation vanished, replaced by a different kind of frustration. Oh, for fuck's sake. Now I was the asshole bullying a disabled person. The kind of memory that makes you want to slap yourself in the middle of the night. I didn't say anything else. I turned, grabbed another cart, and filled it with milk, cereal, canned soup, ramen, anything I could think of that was easy to store. I pushed both carts toward the checkout and jerked my chin, signaling for her to follow. She stared at the two mountains of food, then at me, as if she couldn't process what was happening. I didn't bother explaining. I just grabbed her by the wrist and pulled her along. Her wrist was cool, and so thin it felt like it might snap. After paying, I carried the bags to my flashy sports car. She followed like a little shadow, clutching a few of the lightest bags of snacks. I stuffed everything into the trunk and back seat. Get in, I told her. She hesitated, but opened the passenger door and slid in. Address. She blinked, pointed her mouth, and shook her head. I unlocked my phone, opened Google Maps, and handed it to her. Her small fingers tapped at the screen until she finally pinned a location. The West Side, the old part of town, a neighborhood so run down I wouldn't even drive through it. I didn't say anything, just started the car. The ride was silent. She kept her head down, twisting the hem of her shirt in her hands like a frightened bird trapped in a cage. The car navigated narrow, crumbling streets, finally stopping in front of a tenement building that looked like it could collapse at any moment. I killed the engine, and we started unloading the groceries. The stairwell was dark and damp, filled with the smell of mildew and something else I couldn't identify. She led me to the third floor and opened a peeling wooden door. A thick, pungent smell of herbal medicine hit me. The room was tiny, so small you could see it all in one glance. I'd heard the phrase dirt poor, but this was the first time I'd seen it embodied. An emaciated old woman lay on a worn-out wooden bed. Her eyes were closed, her breathing faint. She looked like she could go at any second. The girl put down her things, rushed to the bed, and expertly tucked the old woman in, her eyes filled with worry. I pretty much understood. It wasn't that she had no money for food. She had no money for her family's medical bills. Stealing bread was probably a last resort, an act of desperation when she didn't want to touch the money saved for her grandmother. TSK. Another sobi story. God, I'm a sucker for these. After settling her grandmother, the girl came over and gave me a deep bow. Then she picked up a worn notebook and a pen from a table and started writing furiously. She handed the notebook to me. The handwriting was neat. Thank you. How much was all this? I promise I'll pay you back someday. I looked at the words and almost laughed. Pay me back? With what? By stealing again. I didn't reply. I just pulled out my phone and called my family's personal assistant. The smell of poverty and medicine in this room was giving me a headache. I just wanted to throw money at the problem and get out. Wong, give me a private room at Mount Sinai and send an ambulance to this address on the west side in the next 15 minutes. I'm texting you the location now. Charge it all to my account. I gave the orders and hung up. The whole call took less than a minute. The girl was completely stunned. She just stared at me, mouth open, having forgotten to cry or write. I get it. The thing she would have to spend a lifetime praying for was something I could solve with a single phone call. The gap between our worlds was just that cruel. What are you waiting for? I kicked the small bag at her feet. Pack your things. We're going to the hospital. She snapped out of her trance and started scrambling to pack. There wasn't much to pack. A few faded old clothes and a chipped enamel mug. The ambulance arrived quickly. Professional paramedics carefully moved the old woman onto a stretcher. The whole time, the girl clutched the corner of my shirt, as if terrified I would disappear. I felt a little awkward, but didn't shake her off. At the hospital, everything was handled. A private room, 24/7 nursing care, and a team of top specialists immediately began their consultation. I stood outside the clean, bright room, watching the doctors and nurses bustle around, and the girl sitting by the bed, a mixture of fear and gratitude on her face. The dark cloud that had been hanging over me since Ryder's death seemed to lift a little. Money really can buy happiness. Just then, I felt a tug on my shirt. She was holding up that battered notebook again. How can I ever repay your kindness? I didn't say you had to. I leaned against the doorframe, looking at this small, stubborn girl, and suddenly found her interesting. She got agitated, writing so fast the words became messy. No, I can't just take your money. You're a good person, but I can't. A good person? I saw those words and the smile on my face widened. In this day and age, a slacker like me could be called a good person. It's great to be rich. First, I'm not a good person. I cut off her frantic writing. Second, I told you I hate trouble. You standing here arguing with me about this is causing me trouble. Got it. She was bewildered by my twisted logic, staring at me, unsure how to respond. Looking at her like that, I sighed. Why did I have to be so handsome and kind-hearted? I walked over to her, took the notebook and pen, and started writing myself. Consider it an insurance policy. She looked at me, puzzled. I wrote again. You study hard, get into a good college, find a good job. If I ever end up homeless and begging on the street, you just have to remember to give me a bowl of soup. I shoved the notebook back into her hands. She stared at the words for a long, long time. Then she looked up, and in those eyes, as clear as a mountain spring, the tears finally broke free. She didn't make a sound, just cried silently, teardrops splashing onto the old notebook. All right, stop crying. I looked away, feeling awkward. Your grandma needs you. What good is all this crying? I thought for a moment and added, what school do you go to? I'll have Wong take care of your tuition. And I'll have him deposit $5,000 a month for living expenses until you graduate college and get a job. Don't tell me no. It's part of the insurance premium. With that, I couldn't stand a melodrama anymore. I gave a few brief instructions to the doctor and left. Driving down the wide city street, I suddenly felt a little ridiculous. Me, the second son of the Vance family, ending up homeless? Not a chance in hell. This was just me spending a little cash to bank some good karma. After all, everyone in my circle was more ruthless than the last. I needed all the good karma I could get to ensure that I, the family slacker, could live a long, prosperous, and lazy life. Then I went broke. 5 years. It only took 5 years. My perfect, elite older brother, Julian, cheated on his wife right after they got married. When the news broke, I was sunbathing on a private island. When I got the call, I almost laughed. It was predictable. My brother, for all his posturing, was a spineless coward at his core, with a weakness for playing the romantic hero. It was only a matter of time before some pretty young thing turned his head. I couldn't even be bothered to fly back for the drama. These high society marriages were all the same. It would blow over. Until my credit card started getting declined, one after another. All my properties, my stocks, my funds. Overnight, they all had a new owner. That's when I realized something was seriously wrong. By the time I rushed back from the island, it was all over. Vance Industries was now Preston Enterprises. My father was indicted on multiple counts of financial crimes. The evidence was ironclad. He'd be singing the jailhouse blues for the rest of his life. My brother, Julian, was left with nothing. His little mistress had vanished into thin air. He was a broken man, a hollowed-out shell of his former self. And me, the useless slacker who just wanted to coast. I wasn't spared either. The personal fortune I'd spent over 2 decades accumulating was gone. Every last cent. I stood in front of my penthouse apartment, blocked by 2 stone-faced bodyguards in black suits. My head was spinning. Wait a minute. You could get your revenge, sure. Get rid of my idiot brother and his mistress. I wouldn't have cared. But sending my dad to prison and gutting the entire Vance Corporation. What was that about? The thought made me furious. Was Julian a ghost? If you have the guts to cheat, you better have the balls to stop your wife from burning your entire family to the ground. What was the point of straying if you couldn't handle the fallout? For a second, I felt like I was living in some female-led revenge novel, and I was the disposable side character who gets wiped out in the crossfire. The door opened. Victoria Preston was sitting on my favorite Italian sofa in my living room. She wore a silk nightgown, a sliver of a pale calf visible, elegantly swirling a glass of my prized Romanicani. 5 years had made her more beautiful and colder. The aura of absolute power she radiated was suffocating. She saw me, set down her glass, and gave me a gentle smile, as if we were still family, as if she were still my warm, respectable sister-in-law. Leo, you're back. I just stared at her. She stood up, walking barefoot across the soft wool rug toward me. Don't look at me like that. I didn't want this. She reached out to touch my face, but I turned my head away. She wasn't offended. She retracted her hand and spoke slowly. Your brother is a fool. I gave him a chance. He didn't take it. I laughed coldly. So that's your excuse for taking down my entire family? No. She shook her head, a playful look entering her eyes. Actually, I always found you much more interesting than your brother. Unfortunately, back then, I needed the heir to the Vance fortune, not a professional slacker. She paused, her voice laced with temptation. But things are different now. He wronged me first. My revenge is justified. Now I don't need a husband. She stepped closer. The rich scent of her perfume was an invasion, aggressive and overwhelming. Leo, interested in staying and keeping me company. I can take care of you, just like I always have. Hearing that, I burst out laughing. I laughed so hard tears came to my eyes. Wow, I wiped my eye. Listening to you, I'm almost convinced you're the one who personally delivered that mistress to my brother's bed. Her smile finally faltered. It was only for a second, but I caught it. Any last shred of doubt I had evaporated. Of course, this woman was, and always had been, a psychopath. She would do anything to get what she wanted. I stopped laughing. My face was a mask of indifference. I looked her in the eye and slowly raised my middle finger. Go to hell. The last trace of her smile vanished, replaced by an icy coldness. You don't know what's good for you. She waved her hand without another glance. The two bodyguards grabbed me, one on each side, and lifted me like I was nothing. I was thrown out of my own home. The heavy door slammed shut in my face, cutting me off from everything I had ever owned. I stood in the empty hallway and let out a bitter laugh. If I'd actually believed her and stayed as her pet, I probably wouldn't even know how I died when she got tired of me. I knew I couldn't beat her. She'd outsmarted my old fox of a father. What chance did a slacker like me have? Stay away from the crazy woman. Being alive is more important than anything. I fumbled in my pocket for my phone. No money meant survival was priority number one. I scrolled through my contacts, looking for all my so-called friends, the ones who were always calling me Leo, my man. I dialed the first number. Yo, Josh, it's me, Leo Vance. 3 seconds of silence. Then a cautious voice. Who? Sorry, wrong number. Click. He hung up. I stared at my phone for a second, then laughed at myself and dialed the next number. Same result. Third, fourth. Wrong number or no answer. The hypocrisy was astounding. I leaned against the cold wall, deleting the contacts of my friends one by one. By the end, the only numbers left were my family's, all grayed out, all unreachable. I sold everything of value I had on me. It added up to less than $10,000. Before, that wouldn't have even covered a night out. Now it was all I had. I needed a way to make money. I wandered the streets aimlessly, trying to figure out my next move. Without realizing it, I'd walked back to my old apartment building. I looked up at the brightly lit penthouse that used to be mine and couldn't help but smile bitterly. Whatever. I could always get a job in a factory. Low barrier to entry, and they usually provide room and board. I'd had a good 20-something years of the high life. I couldn't complain. Head down, lost in thought, I walked straight into someone. It was a soft impact, and a faint, pleasant scent filled the air. I started to apologize and looked up, my eyes meeting a pair of clear, lucid ones. It was a young woman with a delicate face, dressed in a simple white t-shirt and jeans, as clean and unassuming as a blank sheet of paper. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. She, however, clearly knew me. I saw it in her eyes. The moment she recognized me, they lit up with an indescribable mix of surprise and relief. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then seemed to remember something. Fumbling in her pocket, she pulled out a phone and typed quickly, the screen's glow illuminating her anxious face. I frowned. The silent form of communication stirred a memory from a dusty corner of my mind. Mr. Vance, do you remember me? Mr. Vance? Not many people call me that anymore. I studied her face, and the fragments of memory began to click into place. 5 years ago, the trembling figure in the supermarket, the girl caring for her grandmother in a rundown shack, the young woman who had written on a piece of paper, "How can I repay you?" "It's you," I said, stunned. Her eyes shone brightly as she nodded eagerly, the joy practically spilling out of them. I was even more confused. "What are you doing here?" She typed again, holding the phone out for me. "I saw the news about your family. I was worried about you. I guess you might come back here to look, so." I waited. Since yesterday, my heart felt like it had been struck by a soft hammer. For the entire 24 hours since I'd been kicked out, while all my so-called friends were busy cutting ties, this girl I barely remembered, whom I'd helped on a whim 5 years ago, had been waiting here for me. A wave of absurd, complicated emotion washed over me. I wanted to say something dismissive like, "Thanks, but I don't need your help," or "You should go home. Don't worry about me." But looking into her eyes, so pure and free of any guile, the words I usually use to keep the world at arm's length got stuck in my throat. She seemed to sense my predicament and typed another line. "Do you have nowhere to go?" I remained silent, which was an answer in itself. She put her phone away and did something I never expected. She reached out and gently, tentatively, took hold of the sleeve of my hoodie. Her grip was light. I could have easily pulled away. But the faint, pleading yet firm pressure felt like an invisible chain, rooting me to the spot. She tugged me along, turning toward the street corner. On some strange impulse, I didn't resist. I just followed. We stopped in front of a small, cozy bakery, glowing with warm light and the sweet scent of baking. The sign read Glimmer Bakery. The shop was closed, but the lights in the display window were still on. She unlocked the door with a key and then looked back, motioning for me to come inside. The shop was small but immaculate. The air, thick with the smell of butter and wheat, instantly chased away the chill I'd been carrying all night. She poured me a glass of warm water, then pulled a carefully preserved folder from under the counter. She opened it and slid a yellowed piece of paper across the counter to me. It was the insurance policy I'd scribbled down 5 years ago. If I ever end up homeless and begging on the street, you just have to remember to give me a bowl of soup. She pointed at the words, then at me, then at herself and the bakery. Her expression was as serious as if she were fulfilling a sacred oath. Finally, she turned, took a still warm croissant from the cooling rack, broke it in half, and offered it to me. There was no pity in her eyes, no sympathy, just a simple, matter-of-fact sense of "it's my turn now." I looked at the piece of bread, then back at her clear eyes. To hell with factory work. I took the croissant and bit into it. It wasn't as refined as the pastries I was used to, but it was comforting. "Are you hiring?" I asked, my voice hoarse and unfamiliar. The girl froze for a second, then a huge, brilliant smile bloomed across her face. She nodded emphatically. That day, the first, aimless half of my life ended. The second half became intertwined with this little shop called Glimmer. And my new boss was a mute girl I thought I'd never see again. The girl's name was Maya. It suited her. With the money I'd given her and her own savings, she'd opened Glimmer Bakery on this old street after graduating from college. The shop wasn't big, but business was steady. The neighbors all seemed to look out for her, going out of their way to buy a few pastries and chat for a bit. It's tough for a young woman on her own. Good, now she's got some help. He looks reliable. Wearing an apron with a cartoon bear on it, I clumsily bagged a freshly baked loaf of bread. Their words barely registered. Reliable. Me. A slacker who couldn't tell a spatula from a wrench. What part of me looked reliable? But my presence did lighten her load. At least she no longer had to haul 100-pound sacks of flour and sugar by herself. At night, after he closed up, we'd go upstairs to the small apartment. If her old place was dirt poor, this was maybe a step up to sparsely furnished. A dining table, 2 chairs, a sofa, and a small room section off from the balcony. That was my bedroom. It was smaller than a master bathroom in my old mansion, but I slept more soundly there than I had in the last 20-plus years. There were no mind games, no fake smiles, just the faint scent of wheat wafting up from the bakery below. I started learning how to be a normal person, how to sweep without kicking up a cloud of dust, how to use a pressure cooker without blowing up the kitchen. Mostly, my attempts were disastrous. I mistook salt for sugar and made a pot of incredibly salty red bean paste. She took one bite, her face scrunching up, but she didn't spit it out. She just quietly drank a large glass of water. Then she picked up her notebook and wrote, "The flavor is very unique. Maybe a little less sugar next time." Looking at her earnest expression, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I snatched the bowl from her and dumped it in the trash. After that, I started learning sign language. Not for any noble reason. It just felt inefficient to have her constantly writing in a notebook. I bought a stack of books, and every night, after she went to sleep, I'd practice in my little room, mimicking the videos on my phone. From as simple as hello and thank you to "you work hard today" and good night. The first time I awkwardly signed good morning to her, she froze. Then, her eyes, usually so calm, lit up as if a star had fallen into them. She raised her hands and carefully signed back. You too. In that moment, I felt a sense of accomplishment I hadn't experienced in my entire life. The days passed, one by one, and life improved. I went from being a klutz who couldn't even turn on an oven to an apprentice baker who could whip cream, pipe frosting, and knead dough. The shop got busier. We even took over the space next door and expanded. My bank account started to grow again. I had enough to move out and rent my own place. I thought about bringing it up with Maya several times, but the words always died on my lips. Where would I go? What would I eat? It was lonely living alone. Besides, she was a young woman running a business by herself. She needed the help. I came up with a dozen excuses and then comfortably continued to freeload. Maya never mentioned it either. She seemed to have accepted my presence as a fact of life, like the sunrise or the fern on the windowsill. I don't believe in love. My father and my brother are exhibits A and B, but the sense of peace I felt with Maya was becoming addictive. I shook my head, trying to clear out the jumble of thoughts. Right? I don't believe in it. Oh, it's almost noon. I should make her lunch. She's had a bit of a cough lately. I should make her some chicken soup. I was untying my apron to head upstairs when a familiar figure pushed open the shop door. The woman who entered wore a tailored suit. Her makeup was flawless, and her hair was pulled back in an impeccable bun. She radiated success. It was Isabel Martin. 5 years had washed away every trace of the poverty and humility that once clung to her. She was no longer the ice queen in a faded uniform, begging me for help in the woods. Now, she was polished and perfect. A young man followed her, probably in his early 20s, handsome and also in a sharp suit, looking like a fresh college grad. His eyes, when they fell on me, were full of open judgment and hostility. The male assistant. Isabel's gaze lingered for a moment on my bear-print apron. Her brow furrowed almost imperceptibly before she smoothed her expression back into a polite smile. Leo Vance. It's been a long time. I nodded, not stopping what I was doing. You. She seemed to want to ask something, but thought better of it. Instead, she took a check from her Hermes bag and slid it across the counter. This is $200,000. I know it's a few years before the 10-year mark, but I have the means now, so I wanted to pay you back early. I glanced at the number, picked up the check, and stuffed it in my pocket. Thanks. It was what she owed me, though I'd never actually expected to see it. My casual acceptance seemed to catch her off guard, derailing whatever speech she had prepared. A flicker of surprise crossed her face. She probably expected me to refuse, or at least act shocked and grateful. I did neither. The assistant behind her, seeing how quickly I took the money, looked at me with even more contempt, mixed with an I knew it sort of satisfaction. Isabel quickly composed herself. Her eyes swept over our small bakery before landing back on my face, her expression shifting to one I knew all too well, pity from on high. Leo, I heard about what happened to your family. If you don't have anywhere to go right now, you could come work for me. My husband and I just started our company, and we're hiring. I can arrange a position for you. Don't worry about the salary. Her deliberately compassionate act made my stomach turn. That deal years ago was an investment on my part, a debt she repaid. The books were balanced. Now, she was trying to turn her former creditor into a charity case. I looked at her assistant, whose glare was intensifying by the second, and I suddenly understood. She was enjoying this, the feeling of saving someone. Just as I had enjoyed her desperation back then, she was now savoring my fall from grace. The only difference was that she was more hypocritical, cloaking it all in a veneer of kindness. Unfortunately for her, I had no interest in following in her assistant's footsteps, playing the role of the other man in some drama born of gratitude. No, thanks, I said coldly. I'm good here. My refusal made her smile stiffen. Leo, don't be stubborn. I know the kind of life you used to live. Now, her tone was full of a self-assured, I understand you. I said, no thanks. I cut her off, my patience wearing thin. She finally gave up, her pretty face showing a hint of annoyance at being rejected. Fine. If that's your decision, I won't force you. Here's my card. If you change your mind, you can call me anytime. She placed the card on the counter and turned to leave. As she did, Her assistant immediately stepped forward, his hand hovering supportively near her arm. Isabel turned her head and gave him a soft, intimate smile that was clearly just for him. Perfect. I casually picked up my phone, pointed it at them, and silently snapped a picture. The angle was perfect. The assistant's hand was almost on her waist, and the look on her face was one no one would mistake for simple professional courtesy. "See you around," I said, giving a little wave with my phone. Isabel left with her boy toy, their black Porsche disappearing around the corner. It took me 2 minutes to find her husband's public email address online. I sent the photo anonymously. After that, I deleted the picture and the sent email. My mood improved considerably. What you do on your own time is your business, but you don't get to look down on me. For that, you get a little trouble. 8. I went upstairs to make lunch. After a quiet meal with Maya, my mind finally settled. I leaned against the counter, thinking about what to do with the unexpected 200 grand. The paper felt real in my hand, the number almost dazzling. How long had it been since I'd seen this much money? Our lives didn't have to be so tight anymore. And Maya could finally get the new oven she'd been wanting. The more I thought about it, the happier I got. I never realized how useful $200,000 could be. Just then, the bell on the door jingled, and a saccharine, deliberately frail voice shattered my daydream. "Leo." I turned to see Chloe Preston. Wow, it was a popular day for old acquaintances. She was wearing a white sundress, her long hair flowing over her shoulders. She looked so innocent, like a delicate flower completely unaware of the world's harsh realities. If I remembered correctly, her unfortunate husband, Ethan Cole, the scholarship kid she'd chased down after Ryder died, had jumped off a building less than 2 years ago. "What do you want?" I asked, leaning against the counter, my face blank. She bit her lip, her eyes shimmering. It was her signature move, the "I have something to say, but I'm too delicate to say it" look. "I wanted to see you." I almost laughed out loud. "Chloe, what's the act today?" She flinched, and her eyes immediately reddened as if she'd been deeply wounded. "Leo, I know I was foolish before. I did a lot of things wrong, and I hurt you. I always thought I wanted some grand, passionate love story, but now I realize all I truly want is a stable home." She looked up, her watery eyes fixed on me, filled with regret and what was supposed to pass for deep affection. "Leo Vance, let's start over. I know about your situation. What my sister did was awful, but it's okay. I could take care of you." Oh, the prodigal bad girl returns. Except, when exactly did we start anything? I fought the urge to roll my eyes, my thoughts drifting back a few years. Her wedding to Ethan Cole had been a huge, emotional affair. On the stage, she'd cried, declaring he was the light of her life, the happiness she would fight for against all odds. I was in the audience looking at the completely overwhelmed guy on stage, and I had only one thought. This guy is so screwed. And sure enough, less than 2 years into the marriage, Chloe got bored. She was never in love with a person. She was in love with the idea of love. She craved the drama, the feeling of being a rebel fighting against the world for her true love. When the passion faded and marriage became about mortgages and taking out the trash, she grew restless. Then, a perfectly charming homewrecker appeared. The rest of the story was as cliché as a soap opera. Cheating, discovery, fights. Except her poor boy husband wasn't a complete doormat. He had evidence of her affair and was planning to use it to fight back, to salvage some dignity. And then he committed suicide by jumping off a building. The world doesn't work with coincidences that neat. This had my former sister-in-law Victoria's fingerprints all over it. That's why I could never respect Victoria. Her hypocrisy was staggering. When my brother cheated, she destroyed my entire family, and it was righteous vengeance. When her sister cheated, she helped clean up the mess, and it was justified family loyalty. She was never a force for justice. She just needed an excuse that would let her take everything she wanted with a clear conscience. My brother's affair was just that, a convenient excuse. Nothing more. Snapping back to the present, I looked at Chloe, still performing her one-woman show of heartfelt remorse, and a smirk spread across my face. "Chloe, do you think every man on the planet is an idiot?" Her expression froze. "Your husband's funeral was quite the spectacle," I said slowly. "I saw it on the news. You're crying your eyes out. Truly heartbreaking." Her face started to pale. "It's just a shame," I continued, my tone shifting, that I happened to be outside a hotel that night and saw someone who looked a lot like you heading into an elevator with a pretty boy on her arm. The blood drained from Chloe's face. Oh, and that pretty boy, he didn't last long either, did he? I feigned a sudden realization. Later on, you discover that he was the one who drove your beloved husband to his death, and then he also jumped off a building. Chloe, aren't you tired? I took a step forward, staring into her trembling eyes. Doesn't it get exhausting, wearing a mask and acting all the time? She stumbled backward, hitting the doorframe, shaking like a leaf in the wind. You're lying, she stammered, her voice weak and unconvincing. I couldn't be bothered to argue with her anymore. I wasn't worried about her retaliating. A woman so obsessed with playing the victim would never allow herself to lose her composure and lash out in anger. Her persona was more important than her life. She'd worn that mask for so long, it was fused to her skin. Get out. The words left my mouth. She looked as though she'd been pardoned, scrambling out of the shop in a pathetic retreat. How did I know all this? Because back when I was still the coasting second son of the Vance family, my favorite pastime was keeping up with the gossip of the rich and famous. Watching these well-dressed men and women engage in their sordid, secret affairs gave me a strange sense of superiority. See, they're all terrible people. So, even if I was just a slacker, I had nothing to feel guilty about. In a world of monsters, wasn't just trying to be a decent human a kind of effort in itself? The shop was finally quiet again. I let out a long breath, feeling as though I'd expelled 5 years of bad energy. I heard soft footsteps on the stairs. Maya came down, holding a bowl of soup she just made. She walked over, handed it to me, then picked up her notebook. A friend of yours? I shook my head. Not really. Just someone I used to know. She wrote again. You seem upset. I looked into her clear eyes. There was no pity there, only genuine concern. I took the bowl of warm soup. The heat spread from my palm through my entire body. I'm not. I shook my head. I put down the bowl and, with slightly clumsy gestures, signed to her. I'm fine. She understood, and a sweet smile lit up her face. She raised her hands and carefully signed back. That's good. Sunlight streamed through the window, warming us. The air was filled with the familiar, comforting scent of butter and wheat. I took a sip of the soup. It was delicious. After that day, I completely disconnected from my old life. I wanted nothing more to do with any of them. All I wanted was to live a quiet life with Maya, running our little shop. My days fell into a new rhythm. I'd wake up at 5, half an hour before her, to get the first batch of dough rising. By the time she came downstairs, sleepy-eyed, the kitchen would already smell of fresh bread, and I'd have hot water ready for her. She would always sign, "Good morning," before tying her apron and starting on the day's desserts. We rarely spoke, but our movements were a silent, practiced dance. She handled the delicate decorations, and I took care of the heavy lifting and the cash register. On busy days, when she'd get flustered, I'd quietly lower the thermostat or hand her a glass of ice water. Sometimes her fingers would brush against mine when she took the glass, cool and soft. I started paying attention to her habits. I no longer tried to avoid certain topics, and she no longer had to guess what I was thinking. Life was full. During the day, we ran the shop. At night, she taught me how to make more complex pastries, and I taught her funny signs I'd learned online. Sometimes she would laugh so hard she'd bend over, a silent, joyous laughter that was more beautiful than any sound. My signing improved. We could spend whole evenings chatting without a pen or paper. That old man came in for a cake again today, I'd sign. I know. He said it was for his granddaughter. She'd reply. Do you believe him? Nope. It was for his wife. We'd look at each other and smile. This easy understanding felt like home. I started to think about something seriously. I wanted to marry her. I still didn't believe in love, not in the fairy tale sense. But I was starting to believe that some people are just meant to be together. I simply wanted to keep living like this, with her, forever. I wanted everyone to know she was mine. I wanted to be the one to take care of her when she was sick and be by her side when we were old. 3 months later, I asked her to marry me. It was her birthday. I'd planned a small surprise at the shop. When she came downstairs that evening, the whole place was lit with candles. I turned the empty cake boxes into little lanterns, casting a warm, colorful glow. She stood frozen on the stairs, her hand covering her mouth. I walked to her, got down on one knee, and pulled out a ring. It wasn't some ridiculously expensive diamond, just the best one I could afford from the local jeweler. Maya, I'm not good with speeches, and I don't believe in forever promises. But I want to run this shop with you until we're both too old to stand. Will you marry me? She cried, tears falling like pearls onto the floor. She nodded furiously and held out her hand for the ring. It was a little loose. Her fingers were so slender, but she made a fist to keep it from falling off. I pulled her into a hug, breathing in the faint, sweet scent of her hair. In that moment, I felt like my entire life up to that point had just been a long road leading me to her. Our wedding was a simple, small affair. We only invited our neighbors and a few close friends. The wealthy crowd I used to run with was, of course, not on the guest list. As for my mother, she had married her lover shortly after the divorce, and we hadn't spoken since. I felt no need to reach out. Some ties are better left broken. This wasn't about putting on a show. It was about giving Maya a day that was truly hers. The day before, I got a haircut and bought a decent suit. We had picked out Maya's dress together. When she tried it on, she practically glowed. I stood outside the dressing room, looking at her reflection in the mirror, and felt a sense of disbelief. Was this beautiful, angelic woman really going to be my wife? The wedding day went off without a hitch. Maya's grandmother, who was doing much better, was there in a wheelchair. The old woman took my hand and said in a weak voice, "Thank you for taking care of my Maya." I felt a little embarrassed. She's the one who takes care of me. When we exchanged rings, Maya's hand was trembling. I held it steady and whispered in her ear, "Don't be nervous. It's just a formality." She let out a little laugh, and the tension melted away. The officiant asked me, "Leo Vance, do you take Maya to be your wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, to love and to cherish, as long as you both shall live?" "I do." Then he turned to Maya. "And do you, Maya, take Leo to be your husband?" Maya couldn't speak, but she nodded with all her might, then signed, "I do." The officiant paused, unsure what to do. I smiled and translated for him. She said, "I do." The room erupted in applause. When it was time to kiss, she was shy, her face as red as an apple. I kissed her gently, so lightly, as if she were made of glass. Then I whispered in her ear, "Mrs. Vance, I look forward to our future together." She giggled, her shoulders shaking in my arms. At the reception, one of the neighbors had a little too much to drink and grabbed my hand. "Leo, my boy, you found a good one. You better treat her right." "I will. I know." My old college roommate came over to congratulate me. "Leo, you've changed," he said. "How so?" "You used to have this air about you, like nothing mattered. Now, you seem like a real person." I looked over at Maya, who was signing with her grandmother, and smiled. I guess I just found something that matters. After the wedding, we went back to our apartment upstairs. Everything was the same, just filled with flowers and gifts. Maya changed out of her wedding dress and into her regular clothes, then went to the kitchen to make me a late-night snack. I stood in the doorway, watching her, and felt a deep sense of contentment. This was the life I wanted. Just two people living a simple life. She brought over the food and saw me staring. She waved a hand in front of my face. "What are you thinking about?" "You," I answered honestly. Her face flushed, and she playfully smacked my arm. Then she wrote in her notebook, "Frowny face Leo Vance. We're married." "Yeah, we are. Do you regret it?" "Never." I shook my head. "You." "Never," she wrote. "It just feels a little unreal, like a dream." I reached out and gently pinched her cheek. "Does that feel real?" She rubbed her cheek, glaring at me. Then she wrote, "Not a dream. No, not a dream." Life after the wedding was even quieter than I had imagined. We'd wake up together, prepare for the day at the shop together. Maya would bake, I'd package and handle the customers. We'd have lunch. She'd take a nap while I read or scroll through my phone. We'd open again in the afternoon, close up at night, have dinner, and sometimes go for a walk. It was a simple, almost monotonous existence, but it felt full. Sometimes I watched Maya while she worked, completely focused, and think, how is this woman so beautiful? Sometimes she'd create a new pastry and bring me the first piece to try. Seeing the hopeful look on her face, I'd always give her an exaggerated thumbs up. Her eyes would crinkle into crescent moons as she smiled. We rarely argued. When we did have a disagreement, we resolved it quickly. Her Gentle nature had softened my own rough edges. On slow days, we'd close early and walk to a nearby park. She loved feeding the pigeons and always brought a bag of breadcrumbs. They recognized her now, fluttering over as soon as they saw us. She'd crouch down, carefully sprinkling the crumbs, and they'd gather around her, completely unafraid. I'd sit on a bench, watching her, a warmth spreading through my chest. Sometimes little kids would wander over, curious. She'd share her breadcrumbs with them, showing them how to feed the birds. Even without words, her gentle gestures made her a favorite among the children. 6 months later, Maya was pregnant. She held up the doctor's report, beaming like a child. "We're having a baby," she signed, her whole face lit up. I took the report, looking at the data, my emotions a tangled mess of excitement, nervousness, and a touch of panic. I was going to be a father? Could someone like me really be a good dad? Maya must have sensed my anxiety. She came over and hugged me. "Don't be afraid," she signed. "We'll learn together." The pregnancy was hard on her. She was often nauseous and sick. I took over all the heavy work at the shop so she could rest. The hormonal shifts made her emotional, and sometimes she'd cry for no reason. I never knew how to comfort her, so I would just sit with her and hand her tissues. "I'm sorry," she'd cry and sign at the same time. "I don't even know why I'm crying." "It's okay," I'd say, rubbing her back. "Let out." Towards the end, her belly was huge, and everything was an effort. I devoted myself to taking care of her, terrified of something going wrong. One night, she suddenly went into labor. I panicked, rushing her to the hospital in an Uber. Those few hours waiting outside the delivery room were the longest of my life. Finally, a nurse came out, holding a tiny, bundled-up baby. "Congratulations. It's a girl. Mother and daughter are both healthy." I took the baby, looked at her tiny face, and suddenly I was crying. This was my daughter, mine and Maya's. Maya was lying in a hospital bed, exhausted but happy, looking at us. "She looks just like you," she signed weakly. "Nonsense. She looks like you." We named her Aurora. We hoped she would be a light in our lives. On the day of our daughter's 1-month celebration, an unexpected visitor showed up at the shop. Victoria Preston. She was as elegant as ever, though there were a few fine lines around her eyes now. She looked at the baby in my arms, and a rare, gentle expression softened her face. "She's a beautiful child." "Thanks," I said, a little warily. "What are you doing here?" "Relax," she smiled. "I'm not here to cause trouble." She sat down, bought a few things, and then said casually, "Do you remember? When we were kids, we both thought love was just some silly game people made up to fool themselves." I frowned but said nothing. "I still think that," she said, taking a sip of water. "Marriage, family, they're just cold, boring contracts of interest and responsibility." She paused, then finally turned her gaze to me, her expression complex. "But it looks like one of us was lying back then. It's not that you don't believe in love," Victoria said, each word deliberate. "You just didn't believe it could happen to someone like you." I didn't deny it. "So," she stood up, "congratulations, Leo. You found the life you wanted." She took a folder from her bag and placed it on the table. "What's this?" "Your assets. I'm returning them to you, untouched," she said. "Consider it a gift for the baby." I was stunned. "Why?" "Because taking them in the first place was just a way to poke you, to see what you'd do," she said with a light laugh. "I didn't expect you to have such good luck and get picked up by a good woman." She walked to the door, then looked back at me, a hint of envy in her eyes. "You're very lucky, Leo. Cherish it." And then she was gone. I opened the folder. Inside were property deeds, stock certificates, and bank account information. It was all there, untouched. In fact, there was even more than I remembered. These things that I once considered my entire world were now lying quietly in front of me. But I didn't feel the ecstatic joy I would have expected. These things were important, yes. They meant Maya wouldn't have to work so hard, that our little family would have a safety net. But compared to my wife and daughter, they were nothing. Wah, Aurora, as if sensing the shift in the room, scrunched up her face and started to cry. I snapped back to reality, tossing the expensive documents aside and clumsily trying to soothe her. Hearing the crying, Maya rushed down from upstairs, a concerned look on her face. She saw me, then the conspicuous folder on the table, and a flicker of anxiety crossed her eyes. I smiled at her and mouthed the words, "It's fine." "She's hungry," Maya signed, walking over and expertly taking the baby from me. I looked at my daughter's flushed little face, and my heart melted. Okay, Aurora, Daddy's gonna make you a bottle. Maya held our daughter, watching me fumble with the formula, a gentle, happy smile on her face. The sun streamed through the clean glass window, bathing them both in a warm glow. Victoria was right. I am incredibly lucky. I brought the bottle over and sat down next to Maya. Victoria was here, I said, testing the temperature of the milk on my wrist. Maya looked nervous. What did she say? Nothing much. Just came to see the baby, I said, not wanting to drag our complicated past into our peaceful present. She said Aurora is cute. Maya relaxed, then picked up her pen and paper to write frowny face. Of course she is. She's our daughter. Watching her write so earnestly, I felt a sudden urge. Maya, she looked up. I love you. She stared at me, her eyes instantly welling up. I love you too, she signed, tears rolling down her cheeks. So much. I put down our daughter and pulled her into my arms. In our little shop, with the sun shining in and our daughter sleeping peacefully in her cradle, everything was quiet. Everything was perfect. This, I thought, is my life. No grand romance, no epic success story. Just a simple life with the person I love. And it was good. Later, our business thrived, and our daughter grew up happy and healthy. Sometimes, I take my wife and daughter to the prison to visit my dad. The old man was in good spirits. The calculating look on his face had been replaced by a certain cheerfulness, and he was always happy to see his granddaughter. He'd ask me how I was doing, and I'd say I was doing great. He would nod. Good. That's good. Time flew. Our daughter learned to walk, to talk. She called me Dada, and Maya Mama. The three of us lived our simple life. No huge ups and downs, no heart-stopping drama. But every day was steady. Every day was happy.